Um, this is my English project on.
The Romantic movement began in the late 18th century following the American and French Revolution. As with most other movements, there was a boom in art, music, and of course, literature and poems. The Romantic movement in poetry was a reaction to that of Classicism and Rationalism. Classicism and Rationalism spur from scientific observation and logic, inspired by classical Greek and Roman literature. As we all know, some of the greatest minds in history are Greek and Roman, like Plato and Pythagoras and Homer and Kratos. Romanticism is much more of observing the beauty of nature and humanity, expressing inner feelings and imagination, gaining inspiration from the Middle Ages literature. And why wouldn't it? The Middle Ages is one of the most beautiful periods of time, and unlike the Romans and Greeks, held plenty of imagination. Classicism and rationalism also can be defined as more pragmatic and logical, much more interested in science, and can be defined as more conservative in their traditions. In addition, they emphasized moderation and self-restraint. So put down that extra donut and turn off the video game, Sonny. There's science to be had. Meanwhile, Romantics were much more idealistic and concerned with the individual. They were believers in the supernatural and more liberal and expressive, and contradictorily believed in excess and spontaneity. So go ahead, eat that extra donut. Let's go to the woods and dance and sing and be one with nature. Just based off the description of the Romantics, if you have a certain group of people in your head, just wait.
It gets worse.
There are many big names when it comes to Romantic poets, one of which is William Blake. William Blake's life was largely influenced by religion starting in his childhood. Blake began writing and painting as a child. He was greatly supported by his parents and was sent to drawing school where he gained the knowledge and skill to paint many of his astonishing paintings. All was hunky-dory, except for his visions. He recalls seeing the head of God in his window and the prophet Ezekiel under the tree, and seeing another tree full of angels. There has been speculation as to the cause of these visions, and one doctor argues that he suffered from schizophrenia. These visions of his were reflected in his writings, but the poems analyzed here aren't as strongly influenced as some of the other ones, like The Marriage of Heaven and Hell, where it is written from the perspective of the devil himself, saying things like, "Prisons are built with the stones of law, brothels with the bricks of religion." Anyways, one of the poems written by Blake is entitled The Lamb, which comes from one of his earliest books, Songs of Innocence. "Little lamb, who made thee? Dost thou know who made thee? Gave thee life and bid thee feed?" The heck is this? William Blake is regarded as one of the most influential and major poets of all time, and he's writing like a 5th grader in Sunday school. Oh, what? That's on purpose? Oh, okay. The poem is intentionally written simplistically like a child talking to a lamb. At least, on the surface that's all it is. And that opening line, "Little lamb, who made thee?" Well, I think it's time to have the talk about the birds and the bees. See this? This is foreshadowing. Remember this. "Little lamb, who made thee? Dost thou know who made thee? Little lamb, I'll tell thee. He is called by thy name, for he calls himself a lamb." Now, I'm not the most religious person in the world, but I'm going to go ahead and take a guess and say this poem's about God and creation. Yes, as it turns out, the lamb is a symbol of the ideal creation of God with its white wool, soft voice, and passive nature. It can also be noted that the boy is probably just repeating things he was taught in Sunday school and likely doesn't understand any of it, but is told he must ingrain it and teach it to others. I would make a joke about Colts and Big Brother, but there's a certain someone upstairs that I don't think would appreciate it. This poem is clearly the view of an innocent child. Oh, I see what he did there! Blake wrote a counterpoint to this poem called The Tiger, which comes from a book released afterwards called Songs of Experience. And no, I did not make a typo, it's actually spelt like that. The birds and the bees. This poem is much more symbolic and, consequently, hard to understand. I'll try to interpret it the best I can. "Tiger, tiger, burning bright, in the forests of the night." So the tiger is some kind of shining entity amongst the sea of darkness. "What immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry?" Okay, yeah, I have no idea. Also, really? Eye and symmetry? Saying symmetry like that is just uncomfortable. You're really stretching for rhymes there, Willy boy. In essence, this poem throws out the naivety and childishness, showing that it is written from the perspective either of somebody older outside of the church, or of the same narrator of the lamb after growing up and coming to question what they've been taught. "When the stars threw down their spears, and watered heaven with their tears, did he smile his work to see? Did he who made the lamb make thee?" The narrator is asking, did God who made the lamb make a ferocious creature like you as well? Instead of simply accepting what he's told, like the child and the lamb, This narrator is asking for reason and for answers as to what he's been told and what he believes. Well, that's enough time on Blake. Let's move on. Another juggernaut in the Romantics movement was William Wordsworth. Wordsworth led a much less vision-filled life and was more of a scholar, attending Hawkshead Grammar School and St. John's College in Cambridge. He left to tour Europe before finishing his final semester at St. John's, which greatly influenced his work. Later in his life, he met Samuel Taylor Coleridge, another big name of the Romantics, and who was often associated with Wordsworth for their collaboration on lyrical ballads. Coleridge was also a scholar, but his writings were much more eccentric than Wordsworth. This is because he frequently used laudanum, a mix of opium and alcohol. One of his works, The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, is about a guy who goes on a boat and shoots an albatross, which leads to Death taking his crewmates and later having them all get up and walk towards him with eyes wide.
Cocaine's a hell of a drug.
Anyways, Wordsworth wrote a poem called The World is Too Much with Us. The world is too much with us, late and soon. Getting and spending, we lay waste our powers. Little we see in nature that is ours. We have given our hearts away, a sordid boon. Not again! Essentially, this poem is about how humanity looks into the science of nature too much and how we don't take the time to appreciate the beauty it displays. The image of that group of people is starting to pop up again in your head, isn't it? This sea that bears her bosom to the moon, the winds that will be howling at all hours, and are upgathered now like sleeping flowers. For this, for everything, we are out of tune, it moves us not. That last line is implying that man and nature no longer live in harmony. Great God, I'd rather be a pagan suckled in a creed outsworn, so might I, standing on this pleasant lea, have glimpses that make me less forlorn. What Wordsworth is saying here is that he would give up his education, gentleman status, his wealth and knowledge, his Christianity, and his respect, just to be able to admire nature unlike a scientist. He wants to return to a status of innocence, naivety, imagination, and wonder, just to appreciate the world as it is rather than the science it holds. I don't know, I tend to be able to feel all that stuff after ordering a Happy Meal from McDonald's. The next poet on the list is Robert Browning. He is regarded as a master of the dramatic verse. Though his most popular work is The Ring and the Book, I will be talking about My Last Duchess. This one is much longer than the other one, so I will summarize and highlight. A duke is presenting his art collection to his future father-in-law, trying to impress him. The duke pulls back a curtain to display a painting of his last wife. He goes on to talk about her. She had a heart, how shall I say, too soon made glad, too easily impressed. She liked whate'er she looked on, and her looks went everywhere. Oh, sir, she smiled, no doubt, whene'er I passed her, but who passed without much the same smile? Yeah, I don't want my lady smiling at anything other than me. What's that? You're smiling at cute animals passing by on the street? How scandalous! How dishonest! This grew. I gave commands. Then all smiles stopped together. There she stands as if alive. Hell yeah, dude! You give those commands! You stop her Wait, what? Okay, that I can't get behind. So what happened was that his wife was flirting with others, or that's what's implied. So he had her killed. Nice one. That's a surefire way to get on your father-in-law's good side. What was that I said earlier? Romanticism is much more of observing the beauty of nature and humanity, expressing inner feelings and imagination, gaining inspiration from the Middle Ages literature. Well, there's the Middle Ages inspiration coming about. Yeah, well, there isn't much left to say about this poem other than sometimes you just have to kill your wife? I don't know. Moving on. The last poem I'll talk about is called Music When Soft Voices Die by Percy Bysshe Shelley, which is one of my personal favorites. Shelley is one of the biggest names from the Romantic era, and for good reason. This poem is short and sweet. Music when soft voices die, vibrates in the memory. Odors when sweet violets sicken, live within the sense they quicken. Rose leaves, when the rose is dead, are heaped for the beloved's bed. All of these are allegories for pleasant memories and their lasting effects. Alluring music, pleasant odors, and elegant roses all live in memory for their beauty and grace. And so thy thoughts, when thou art gone, love itself shall slumber on. Even after you, my love, have left, these feelings I feel will last forever within me with the image of you. Ah, isn't it beautiful? He seems like a true romantic. Oh hell yeah, sick pun!